Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today, we are asking a really fundamental question about the machinery of justice.
Okay.
Specifically, how do truth, justice, and credibility actually function inside legal and social systems that are designed, I mean, quite literally designed, to exclude or marginalize certain voices?
It's a huge question because we often grow up with this very sort of procedural idea of justice. It's the TV drama version,
Yeah, right. The CSI effect.
Exactly. You find the smoking gun, you isolate the DNA, you present the facts in a courtroom with, I don't know, perfect lighting, and the truth just wins. It's a nice story.
Well, it is a comforting story. It suggests that the courtroom is this clean laboratory where truth is discovered. But the systemic inquiry we're making today really challenges that foundation. We have to ask, what happens when the rules of that courtroom, the procedures themselves, determine that certain facts simply don't count?
Or can't even be heard.
Or can't be heard? What happens when this bureaucracy of legitimacy decides whose diary is admissible evidence, whose testimony requires a man to validate it, and whose medical opinion is considered professional versus, merely domestic?
That phrase, bureaucracy of legitimacy, that is the lens we're going to be using heavily today.
I think we have to.
Because we are diving into The Frozen River by Ariel Lahan. Now, if you just look at the dust jacket, this presents as a historical murder mystery.
Absolutely. It has all the elements.
It's got a dead body in the ice, a small town full of secrets, a rape accusation. It's structured like a thriller. But we aren't here for a simple book report.
No, not at all. For our purposes, we are not just looking at a whodunit. We are treating this novel as a case study in what you could call institutional blindness.
Okay, so a case study of what exactly?
We're looking at gendered power, legal authority, and even just the simple act of record keeping, and we're examining them as systems. This is a deep dive into how power is preserved, not by, burning books or actively suppressing facts.
But by something more subtle.
Much more subtle. It's preserved by controlling the very definitions of what constitutes a fact in the first place.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The setting here is vital to the system we're mapping out. We are in Hallowell, Maine.
Right.
It's the late 18th century. The book starts in 1789. The American Revolution is in the rearview mirror. The Constitution is, barely dry?
Barely.
Yeah.
But out here on the frontier, let's say the polish of the new republic hasn't quite arrived yet.
Not at all. It's rough, it's isolated, and it is brutally cold.
And that cold isn't just atmospheric, it's structural. The title, The Frozen River, it refers to the Kennebec River. And Lahan uses this river as this incredibly potent metaphor right from the very first chapter.
So the Kennebec is the lifeblood of the town, right? It's the highway, the trade route.
It's the connection to the civilized world. It's how news gets in and goods get out. But for half the year, it freezes solid.
And when it freezes, it turns into a trap. It literally traps the body of one of the main antagonists, a man named Joshua Burgess. He's found just entombed in the ice.
Perfectly preserved, but dead.
But metaphorically, and this is where it gets interesting for us, the frozen river represents a system that's in stasis.
Yes. Think about what ice actually does. It locks things in place. It preserves the status quo, it halts flow, it halts communication, it prevents all the murky water, all the dirt from moving downstream.
So the ice locks the social hierarchy of Hallowell in place just as firmly as it holds that body.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Skating over this ice, pun intended, is our protagonist, Martha Ballard. Now, the thing about Martha that really grabbed me is that she isn't a fictional invention.
No, she was a real person.
Real person. The author, Ariel Lahan, based this entire narrative on the actual real-life diary of Martha Ballard, which she kept starting in 1785.
And Martha is such a fascinating historical figure because she occupies this liminal space. She's a midwife. In the novel, just as in real life, she is the community's primary healer.
She does everything. She delivers the babies, she tends to the dying, she treats burns, she mixes sows and poultices.
She is the person you call when things go sideways, the first responder.
But, and this is the core tension of the whole book, in the eyes of the emerging, formal, male-dominated medical establishment, she's an amateur.
Right.
She's been catching babies for decades without losing a single mother, which, for that time, is a statistical miracle. But because she didn't go to Harvard, she's just an old woman with a bag of herbs.
She represents what we'd call informal knowledge or lived experience. And she has a tool that becomes the central mechanism of resistance in this story, her diary.
And it's so important to understand what this diary is. This is not a sentimental journal. It's not, Dear Diary, I felt sad today.
Not at all. It's a day book. It's a ledger. She's recording births, deaths, the fees she's owed, the weather.
And crucially, and this is the key, she records who was present.
Who was there? In a pre-forensic world, Martha Ballard is the database.
She is the blockchain of Hallowell, Maine.
That's it. That diary is the only reliable, immutable record in the whole town. So the mission of this deep dive isn't just to figure out who killed Joshua Burgess.
No.
It's to understand how the community handles the crimes that are surrounding him. And, more importantly, whether the legal system will even allow the truth, Martha's truth, to be spoken aloud.
Okay, let's get into the machinery of that system then. We need to dismantle what you called the architecture of credibility that Lawhon depicts. And I think we have to start with the law of coverture.
We have to.
I think a lot of people have maybe heard the term, but the actual mechanics of it when you see them in action are terrifying.
It's a form of civil death, really. The law of coverture was a legal doctrine that came from English common law, and what it meant was that upon marriage, a woman's legal rights and identity were completely subsumed by those of her husband.
They became one person under the law.
And that one person was the husband.
So she can't own property in her own name. She can't keep her own wages if she earns them. But for this story, the real kicker is that she cannot testify in court in most matters, civil or criminal, without her husband present and giving his consent.
She's a legal nonentity, a ghost in the courtroom.
Hmm.
Now, there was one specific exception that's important here, which was in paternity cases.
Why there?
Well, because the state had a financial incentive to make sure someone paid for the child. So midwives, like Martha, could testify about who they believed the father was.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, women were legally invisible.
And this legal invisibility creates what the book really examines as the rape trap.
Yes.
Let's talk about the case of Rebecca Foster. She's the pastor's wife. A horrific crime occurs. She is raped by two powerful men in the town. The local judge, Joseph North, and the man who ends up in the river, Joshua Burgess.
And the system is designed almost perfectly to make this specific crime impossible to prosecute.
That's
The law at the time required a witness for a capital crime. Rape was a capital crime. It was punishable by death.
Okay, so you need a witness.
You need a witness. But sexual violence is inherently secretive. It doesn't happen in the town square at noon. It happens in the dark, in private, away from prying eyes.
So the law says we need a third-party witness to prove this happened. But the very nature of the crime ensures there is almost never a third-party witness.
It's a perfect logical circle that protects the perpetrator. It creates a lived outcome where, legally, the crime essentially didn't happen. The system demands a standard of evidence that the crime itself precludes.
There's a courtroom scene in the book that is just harrowing, where Judge North is essentially acquitted of the rape charge. And it's not because the jury looks at him and thinks, oh, what a great, innocent guy.
No, it's not even because they think Rebecca's lying.
It's because the legal threshold, this requirement for a witness, creates an impossible standard. The procedure itself prevents justice.
It's not a bug, it's a feature. The system is working exactly as it was designed to, which is to protect men of status. Judge North doesn't have to prove he didn't do it. He just has to point to the rule book and say, you didn't follow procedure.
He weaponizes the bureaucracy.
Completely. He argues procedural points. Where is the witness? Where is your husband to speak for her? He hides behind the supposed neutrality of the court's rules.
And this leads us directly into the second big insight, which is this clash between institutional authority versus informal knowledge.
Right.
This is the battle between Martha Ballard and the new doctor in town, Dr. Benjamin Page. If Judge North represents the corruption of the legal system, Dr. Page represents the arrogance of the institutional system.
It's the perfect medical parallel to the legal problem. On one side, you have Martha. She has decades of experience. She has delivered hundreds, maybe thousands of babies. Her data set, if we want to use modern terms, is impeccable.
He knows what she's doing.
She knows the range of normal. She knows when to intervene and, more importantly, when to wait. She has the wisdom of practice.
And on the other side, you have Dr. Page.
Dr. Page. He's fresh out of Harvard. He's young. He's from a wealthy family. And frankly, he's incompetent. He's dangerous. But he has the piece of paper. He has the credential.
So let's look at the credibility allocation here, as we call it. Dr. Page rides into town and is immediately granted authority. Why?
Because he has the title doctor and he is male. That's it. The court immediately defers to him. The elite families in town defer to him. His word is taken as gospel, even though his methods are actively harmful.
And the book details some just horrific malpractice. I mean, the case of Clarissa Stone.
It's a very difficult section to read. Page completely mismanages a birth because he's impatient and he's arrogant. He doesn't listen to the mother's body. It results in a dead infant, a dislocated infant, as the text describes it. He forces a delivery that nature simply wasn't ready for.
And that's not the only time.
No. Later, he doses another woman, Grace Sewell, with a huge amount of laudanum to stop what he calls false labor, and he nearly kills her. She stops breathing.
And Martha has to swoop in and save her. She literally has to clean up his mess, breathing for the woman, bringing her back.
She does. But here's the systemic blindness. Despite Martha saving the patient and Page nearly killing her, the social structure still defaults to deference toward the male physician in any public setting.
Especially in the courtroom.
Especially there. In the courtroom, Page's opinion on the autopsy of Joshua Burgess is treated as scientific fact, while Martha's is dismissed.
This scene drove me crazy. Page basically glances at the body, which has been frozen and thawed for 2 seconds, and declares, "He drowned."
That's his professional opinion.
Meanwhile, Martha has actually examined the body properly. She's felt the broken bones in his neck. She sees the bruising. She knows there's no water in the lungs from when they moved him. She says clearly he was strangled and thrown in the water.
But her observations, her direct evidence, are dismissed as amateur, as the ramblings of an old woman. Page's theory, based on nothing but his own authority, is accepted as professional.
The system protects the credential, not the truth.
It protects the institution of Harvard medicine over the lived reality of the biological evidence right in front of them.
But Martha has a weapon. She has a tool that North and Page don't seem to account for. They have the authority, the titles, the system on their side, but she has the data.
She does.
We have to talk about the diary as a form of counterpower.
This is maybe the most important mechanism in the whole book. Writing is power. It's permanence. Men like Judge North rely on the fluidity of oral history. They rely on he said, she said, knowing that in their world, he usually wins because of his status.
They count on memory fading?
They rely on silence and erasure. They count on the fact that stories change over time, that details get fuzzy.
But Martha's a glitch in that system.
A huge glitch, because she writes it down immediately with ink.
There is that pivotal moment in the trial where Martha enters her diary into evidence. She does it to prove that Rebecca Foster made the rape accusation immediately after it happened.
Right, because North is trying to claim it's a later fabrication, that it's a revenge plot that she and her husband cooked up months later to ruin him.
So Martha brings the actual book to court. She opens it, and she points to the ink on the page. She says, "On this date, at this time, she told me what you did."
It's ink on paper. It's an immutable object. You can't argue with the timeline when the accusation is written down right there, sandwiched between a recipe for burned salve and a record of a birth she attended that morning.
It gives it a credibility that you just can't deny.
And North is terrified of it. There's a whole subplot where North tries to manipulate the official court records. He uses his influence over the town clerk, Henry Sewell, to try and get charges erased or to reframe the murder of Burgess as an accidental drowning.
He's trying to edit the official database.
Exactly. And Martha's diary is the backup drive. It's the one thing he can't delete.
It's such a crucial concept for today, too. Without that diary, without that personal record, North's narrative simply becomes history. It becomes the official truth.
With a diary, there is a conflict. There is a counter-narrative.
And that conflict is where the truth manages to survive, even if it doesn't win outright in the courtroom.
It doesn't mean she wins immediately. The judge doesn't just bang the gavel and send North to jail based on her diary entry. But it means the lie cannot become total. It creates a fissure in the official story, a crack in the ice.
I want to touch on the why of the crime for a moment, because the book hints at something much darker than just individual depravity. We've been calling this violence as scandal management.
Yes, this is so important for understanding the system. Why did North and Burgess attack Rebecca Foster? The book makes it clear this wasn't just some random act of lust. It was punitive.
It was a message.
It was a tool of social dominance. Rebecca Foster and her husband, the Reverend Isaac Foster, were outliers in the community. They were different. And their difference was that they were inclusive of the Wabanaki people, the local indigenous population.
Right. They welcomed them into their home. They treated them as fellow human beings, which was decidedly not the vibe in 1789 frontier Maine.
Not at all. And Judge North is a veteran of the wars against the French and Indians. He has built his identity and his power on the colonial project of subduing and removing indigenous people. He views the Fosters' inclusivity as a form of treason,
As a threat.
a deep threat to the social order. He hates that a white woman of status is associating with the very people he fought to exterminate.
So the rape is a way to punish her for that, to put her back in her place.
It acts as a mechanism to punish those who threaten the established racial and social hierarchy. It's violence used to manage a scandal, and the scandal in Northside is the erosion of those racial boundaries.
And then when the legal system refuses to address this violence, we see the consequences. We see what the book presents through the wolf analogy.
This comes from a character named Sam Dolan, who is a sort of fringe character, a trapper, and he essentially enacts vigilante justice. He admits to Martha that he's the one who killed Burgess.
And his justification is fascinating from a systems perspective.
It is. He compares a rapist like Burgess to a wolf that has tasted human blood.
You can't reason with it. You can't domesticate it.
Right. His argument is that the legal system has proven it cannot or will not rehabilitate this predator. It protects him.
Mhm.
Therefore, for the safety of the herd, for the safety of the women in the community, the predator must be removed.
It's a grim calculus.
A very grim calculus.
Yep.
But it highlights the total failure of the official justice system. When the law protects the wolf, the sheep start growing teeth.
That brings us to what I think is the final core insight before we try to map this whole thing out. It's this idea of survival as persistence.
Yes.
Martha ends so many of her diary entries with the same simple phrase, I have been at home.
It sounds so passive, doesn't it? I have been at home. Like she was just sitting by the fire knitting.
Right, like nothing happened. But in the context of the novel and her life, you realize it's a radical assertion.
It is. Can you explain why you see it that way?
Well, it means I am still here. It means I survived the winter. I survived the diphtheria epidemic. I survived the men who tried to silence me. I survived the frozen river.
Exactly. And in the end of the book, the legal system does fail, in a way. It fails to punish Judge North. He's acquitted of the rape charge.
Which is infuriating. As a reader, you want that Hollywood ending where he's led away in chains.
Of course. But we get the more realistic ending. The legal verdict is not guilty. But the social verdict, the community verdict, begins to shift.
Because Martha doesn't give up.
Because Martha refuses to stop talking, and she refuses to stop writing. Because her diary exists as a counter-narrative, the community eventually turns on North, he loses his grip on power, he dies alone, and, in his own way, disgraced, even if he was never legally convicted.
So survival itself, just outlasting the oppressor, that is the victory.
That's the only victory available in that system. Persistence is resistance.
Okay, let's pull back and try to look at the whole machine. If we were to draw a systems map of Hallowell, Maine in 1789, what does that circuit board look like? Who are the key components?
Well, first you have to identify the gatekeepers. That's Judge North, Dr. Page, and the other visiting circuit judges. They aren't just participants in the system. They operate the machinery. They decide what testimony is allowed into the court record and what gets struck out. They decide who gets to speak and whose voice counts.
Then you have the recorders.
Right. Martha Ballard is the primary one here, the independent recorder. But you also have the official recorder, the town clerk, Henry Sewell. And he's a fascinating character because he's a weak link in the system. He wants to be accurate. He wants to do the right thing. But he can be bullied and intimidated by the gatekeepers.
And finally, you have the vulnerable.
The vulnerable. Rebecca Foster, the rape survivor. Sarah White, the unwed mother who is publicly shamed. The Wabanaki people. They are the people the system acts upon. They are the data points, not the operators.
And what powers this whole circuit board? What are the incentives driving these actors?
For North, the primary voltage is reputation. He cares more about being seen as a gentleman than actually being one. Every single action he takes, every legal maneuver is to preserve the facade of his status.
And for the community at large, what's their incentive to just go along with it?
For the community, the incentive is order. And this is so crucial to understand. They acquit North partly because hanging a powerful judge is messy. It's disruptive. It shatters the illusion of a just and orderly society.
It makes the town look bad.
It makes the town look bad, and it forces everyone to confront an ugly truth. They would rather live with a comfortable, orderly lie than deal with the chaos of the truth.
There's also just raw economic power. North uses his position with the Kennebec proprietors, the big landowners, to threaten the Ballards' lease on their mill.
Exactly. It's a direct threat. If you testify against me, your family loses its home and its livelihood. Economic coercion is the standard default tool for silencing legal testimony. It's a key part of the map.
I also see these feedback loops that keep the system stuck spinning in circles, like what we could call the respectability politics loop.
Oh, that's a tragic one. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, Rebecca Foster, at the end, she refuses to appear at the final trial. And why? Because she cannot bear the shame and the trauma of recounting the assault again in front of a room full of men who are judging her. She's pregnant by one of the rapists. It's physically and emotionally humiliating.
So she stays home to protect herself.
And the system counts her absence as a lack of evidence. So the trauma that was caused by the crime prevents the victim from participating in the legal process, which then protects the criminal, who is then free to cause more trauma. It's a self-reinforcing loop of
The
injustice.
perfect vicious circle.
And we see a similar loop with the credentials, right? The credentials loop. Dr. Page kills a baby through his incompetence, but he keeps his license because he went to Harvard.
While Martha saves lives but is consistently dismissed as an old woman, the system is designed to protect the credential, not the patient.
And that loop just persists and persists until the cost becomes too high, until so many people are harmed that the community finally sees that the results don't match the reputation.
Right. Until the informal knowledge held by the community overwhelms the formal authority of the institution.
Okay, so we promised to connect this to the present day. And we always say on this show, we aren't here to moralize or to get political, but the patterns in the frozen river are. I mean, they're not exactly subtle. They're staring us right in the face. This isn't just a 1789 problem.
No, the technology has changed, the clothes have changed, but the architecture of credibility hasn't really moved that much. I think the most obvious connection is that tension between data and credentials. We see this everywhere, in modern corporate structures, in tech, in academia, in medicine.
It's the smartest guy in the room syndrome.
Exactly. Think about it in the corporate world. You often have the person who has been doing a specific job for 20 years. That's your Martha Ballard equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
They know where all the bodies are buried. They know how the legacy code works. They know the clients inside and out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the company brings in a consultant with a fancy MBA and a polished slide deck. That's your Dr. Page.
And the board listens to the consultant.
Almost always. Because the consultant speaks the language of institutional authority. They have the credential. And as a system, we often value the person with the right degree or the right job title over the person with the actual lived experience or, the actual results.
We see this in medicine today, too. The stories you hear from patients, especially women who report real symptoms and are told it's just anxiety or stress by a specialist, only for it to be diagnosed as a serious physical condition years later.
It's the exact same dynamic of institutional authority overriding direct embodied observation.
And then there's the concept of the perfect victim. It was so clear with Rebecca Foster being judged for her associations with the Wabanaki.
That is unfortunately timeless. In modern sexual assault cases, the defense strategy is almost always to put the victim on trial.
Right. What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? What's her dating history like?
Exactly. The system looks for any reason it can find to disqualify the victim's testimony based on their character flaws, rather than investigating the actions of the accused.
If you aren't a perfect, unimpeachable nun, your testimony isn't credible.
And even then, they'd probably find a reason. It's all about shifting the burden. If the victim isn't perfect, the crime gets reframed as ambiguous, as a misunderstanding.
And the documentation aspect. We talked about Martha's diary as a kind of 18th century blockchain. In the modern era, this is basically keeping receipts.
It is the single most practical takeaway from this entire book. In a world where institutions can edit the official record through PR statements, through NDAs, through sealing court documents, your personal documentation becomes an act of resistance.
So if you're in a toxic workplace or you're dealing with harassment,
The HR department is the official record, and their primary function is to protect the company. Your personal log with dates, times, direct quotes, who was present, that is your Martha Ballard diary. It's the only thing that stands between you and institutional gaslighting.
I also think it's interesting to look at the correction resistance. The judges in the book, Judge Wood, Judge Payne, they clearly don't like Judge North, but they really, really did not want to convict him.
Because systems naturally resist correcting themselves from within. To convict Judge North is to admit that a judge, a pillar of their system, can be a rapist, and that casts doubt on the integrity of the entire judiciary.
So the system protects North to protect its own image of infallibility.
And we see this pattern repeat everywhere. In police departments that resist investigating their own. In the military. In the Catholic Church. The institution protects the predator to avoid the scandal, not realizing that the cover-up is what eventually destroys the institution's credibility anyway.
Which links right back to our core project here at Crisis and Perception. One of our main themes is always systems versus individual blame.
And it's so easy to read The Frozen River and just hate Judge North. He's a villain. He's a despicable human being. But if we only focus on hating him, we miss the entire point.
What's the deeper point?
The deeper horror is that the law supported him. The tragedy isn't that bad men exist. Bad men will always exist. The tragedy is that the system was built to accommodate them while relentlessly scrutinizing their victims.
It's the weaponization of so-called neutrality.
Yes, that's it exactly. The judges act like they're just following the rules. The law says we need a witness. The law says we need a husband present. They claim their hands are tied, that they're being neutral arbiters.
But neutral rules applied to an unequal playing field always, always favor the powerful. If the rule is you need a husband to testify and you're a widow, or your husband is the one abusing you, that neutral rule has effectively and deliberately silenced you.
Precisely.
We should also mention the author's note at the end of the book because it adds one final, sobering layer to this idea of history's filter. Ariel Lawhon is very clear about where historical fact ends and her fiction begins.
Right. In the novel, Judge North gets a form of poetic justice. He dies alone, suffering from a wound that Martha inflicted on him during a confrontation. It feels satisfying as a reader.
You feel like, okay, justice was served in the end.
But Lawhon tells us in the author's note, in real history, North was never punished. He lived out his life as a respected judge and citizen.
That's a very hard pill to swallow after reading the whole story.
It is, but it reinforces the central point. History is shaped by who gets to do the recording. The only reason we know the other side of this story, the only reason we even know Rebecca Foster's name or anything about Martha Ballard's struggle, is because Martha wrote it down.
If she hadn't kept that diary, North's version would be the only version. It would be the accepted history.
It would be fact.
So, bringing this all to a close, how do we reframe our idea of justice after reading a book like The Frozen River?
I think the book shows us that legal justice and moral justice are very rarely the same thing. Legal justice is a procedure. It's a game with rules. Moral justice is a truth. And in this book, justice, when it comes, ends up being a social process.
It happens outside the courtroom.
Completely outside. It's the women of the town, Lydia North, the judge's own sister, Mrs. Hendricks, the neighbors, eventually realizing the truth and shunning Dr. Page or protecting the vulnerable women from him.
So justice isn't a gavel banging. It's the community finally waking up.
And I think it shows that knowledge is survival. Martha's deep anatomical knowledge, her understanding of the body, allows her to see the truth. She knows what a strangled neck looks like. She knows what a raped and bruised body looks like. The men try to hide the truth with fancy legal words and institutional jargon, but she sees it with biology.
You cannot gaslight biology.
You can't.
Okay, here is my final thought for you to chew on, for everyone listening. If the legal system, or any powerful system, is a frozen river trapping truth just beneath the surface, what are the tools we have today to break the ice? Is it the modern-day diary? Is it the whistleblower with their documents? Or is it something else? Is it just the community finally refusing together to accept the official narrative?
It's a powerful question. And sometimes, maybe the only icebreaker we have is that stubborn refusal to stop speaking. To just keep saying, I have been at home and I'm still here.
A huge thank you to Ariel Lawhon for writing The Frozen River, and of course to the spirit of Martha Ballard for leaving us the map. You can, and you absolutely should, read this book or borrow it from your local library.
It's a truly stunning read.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis and Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.
Until next time.